So we move on to the third commencement matter in the name of Senator Robbie Gallagher. You have 4 minutes, please.
And Minister, you're very welcome to the Chamber this morning, and I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. Basically, what I would like to discuss with you this morning is the Government's decision to defer the property tax recommendations or review and the implications that may now have for pensioners and those on low incomes. A review of the controversial tax on home ownership, the LPT, recommended that Finance Minister Paschal Donohoe increase the thresholds for deferring property tax to ensure that pensioners were not excluded because of the rise in their weekly pension incomes. However, the Government has failed to bring forward any reforms to the local property tax. One could be very cynical here, Minister, and say it was for political reasons due to the European and local elections forthcoming, but I'll wait your comments on that. But on a more serious note, there are serious consequences for the Government's decision or inaction, if you like, on property tax, and the result being that many low and fixed income households will no longer be able to defer their property tax when it is due. As you know, Minister, a couple, both on the maximum state pension of €248.30 per week, giving them a total annual income of €25,800, are now above the threshold to qualify for deferral, which, as you know, was €25,000 for a couple. So now it appears that the message seems to be to pensioners on low incomes, tough guys, that you have to pay up. I think it's a particularly mean approach. As you would know, it doesn't cost government anything to allow this modest incomes to defer their payment. Homeowners can currently defer their property tax charge if their income is below €15,000 for a single person or €25,000 for a couple. And the Property Tax Review recommended increasing this threshold to €18,000 for a single person and €30,000 for a couple. It appears now that Minister's review of the controversial tax dismissed a number of proposals which would make life a lot easier, particularly for pensioners. Among the recommendations included a submission calling for waivers for homeowners on low fixed incomes and people with disabilities. Both suggestions were rejected. The review group also dismissed a proposal to give property tax relief to people over 80 with long-term illnesses, despite this measure being previously recommended in a government report. And the report also ruled out cutting interest rate charged on property tax deferrals, which are mostly availed of again by older people. Information also suggests that approximately 328,000, mostly older people, are eligible to defer their property tax scheme, but quite a limited number are taking up that option. Possibility is the fact that this is a relatively new tax, that people perhaps are not aware that they are entitled to put off their payment, and it would clearly indicate that more needs to be done in relation to that. I understand a figure of approximately 56,000 homeowners choose to defer their property tax last year, so clearly a lot of people may not know about it. And as you know, Minister, the deferral payment incurs a 4% interest rate annually, which is a fixed charge on the property and must be paid on either the sale or the transfer of the home. Again, it's my opinion that the fact that it's a relatively new tax, people clearly don't need more information on how the actual deferral works. An information campaign, I think, is needed. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of us, including older people, have a fear of revenue and are probably afraid to even seek a deferral. And I would hate to think that older people are stretching themselves just to pay a property tax when they may not be aware that a deferral is available to them. So in summary, Minister, I think it's disappointing that a lot of the recommendations contained in that review for the property tax have not been implemented at this point in time. I think there are many good, worthwhile suggestions that would have assisted those on low incomes and those in financial hardship to be outside the property tax net. But unfortunately, that has not been the case. But I look forward to your comments in relation to the points that I've raised here this morning.
Thank you, Senator. Minister, please.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the opportunity for raising the issue. And I know that there will be an opportunity for the Senator to reply to the remarks that I make, and I'll sum up later on. So the House will be aware that the Minister for Finance initiated a review of the LPT in 2018. The Minister believed that it was important that the Government was able to make its position clear in relation to LPT, so that households would be aware of the plans for the tax well in advance of November 19 revaluation date and the associated 2020 and beyond liabilities. The Minister further considered that it was essential that the principle that formed the central part of the terms of reference of the 2015 review of the LPT, that was achieving relative stability in the LPT payments of liable persons, but over the short and long term, would inform the deliberations on the matter. By relative stability in LPT liability, the Minister means that any increases should be modest and affordable and fair. The review of the LPT has now been completed by the Department of Finance in conjunction with the Departments of the Taoiseach, Public Expenditure and Reform, Housing, Planning and Local Government and the Revenue Commissioners. The review focused on the impact of house price movements under a series of scenarios, including different rate and tax band structures. However, against the background of significant but geographically uneven increases in residential property price, the Minister believes it is necessary to engage in further consultation to identify a scenario that would deliver on the condition he set out, that there should be relative stability for all taxpayers in their LPT liabilities, and that any increases should be modest and affordable. Having considered the findings of the review, the Minister has decided to defer the valuation date from the 1st of November 19 to the 1st of November 2020. This should give sufficient time for the Budgetary Oversight Committee to consider the review of the report in the context of the Committee's recommendations in its report on the LPT of the 21st of March 2018. Importantly, as a result of the Minister's decision, the LPT bills of those liable for the tax will not be increasing in 2020. Under the legislation, a deferral option is available in circumstances where the annual gross income of the liable person does not exceed 15,000 for a single person and 25,000 for a couple. Marginal relief applies for owner-occupiers whose income is not more than 10,000 above the income liabilities to permit deferrals up to 50% of the liability. The Minister for Finance understands from Revenue that while there are over 300,000 people that fall within the current income thresholds of the deferral, only about 15% of these actually seek a deferral on those grounds. Contributory and non-contributory state pension rates have risen by €5 a week, and for the majority of persons in receipt of such pensions, their eligibility for LPT deferral will not change as a result of this pension increase. In the small number of cases where the pension increases brings a person over the deferral threshold, such persons may still qualify for a reduction of up to 50% of their liability. The LPT review recommends that income thresholds for deferrals be reviewed regularly by reference to movements in the Consumer Price Index, wage growth in the economy and changes in fixed income payments by the state. From the next valuation date, the review recommends that the deferral thresholds be increased to 18,000 for a single person and 30,000 for a couple. The recommendation, together with the other recommendations in the review, have been referred by the Minister to the Budgetary Oversight Committee for its consideration. The Committee's 2018 report on the LPT indicated that it was against proceeding with automatic revaluation of properties in 19 as provided for in current legislation, as this would result in significant increases in the LPT. The Committee supports revaluation with an adjustment rate nationally to maintain LPT yield, or revaluation with an adjustment rate locally to maintain the LPT yield. The Committee also recommended the cessation of exemptions in relation to new and unused properties on equity grounds and because it broadens the tax base. The deferral of revaluation until November 2020 provides time and space for the Oversight Committee to consider the report of the interdepartmental review and to provide its views to the Minister for Finance. In his engagement with the Committee, the Minister will seek to promote the policy objectives that should underpin any tax changes, and these are the protection of the yield, the most affordable increases if increases occur, integration of new properties into the base, maintenance of the tax base and upholding the progressive nature of the tax. The Minister for Finance considers that the reformed LPT needs to be based on a model of band widening combined with rate changes. The Minister supports retention of the option for local authorities to reduce the LPT rate for their area. The Minister will also engage with the Oversight Committee on the issue of LPT relief for pensions in apartment complexes who are paying management fees.
Minister. Senator, to respond.
Yeah, just very briefly, Minister, thank you for your comprehensive reply. I think you said there in your contribution that only about 15% of households are taking up the option to defer the payment. I think maybe that speaks volumes in itself. As I said in my own contribution earlier, it is a relatively new tax, and I feel that not enough people are aware of the fact that there is an option there to defer their property tax every year, and perhaps it's something government could look at, maybe to do a campaign so that people would be aware that that option is available to them. I think maybe it may have been, in my opinion, an oversight on the department's point that they didn't take into consideration the increases in pension payments to people, and therefore, as a result of that, they are now outside the threshold. But again, Minister, I would ask maybe that's something maybe that you might take into consideration going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Minister, to conclude.
I think in discussing this, though, we need to be honest as well. The local property tax yields €500 million and thereabouts. So any changes to it have a knock-on effect. And while a lot of people are, while there could be a suggestion that people might not be aware of their, the possibility of a deferral, there certainly is an awful lot of people who understand their liability to tax as well, and who know and who understand that when a tax is levied, it has to be collected and it has to be paid. And the review group that was set up, I think it's important to bear in mind as well, there were 5 scenarios put forward. Each of the 5 scenarios was laid out, in terms of its impact. The Minister for Finance has said that the scenarios need to go back to the Budgetary Oversight Committee to see their views on it. I haven't heard from any opposition party which of the 5 scenarios they would trump for. And each of the 5 scenarios has, its own pros and cons. And I know that there was, for instance, a lot of media coverage in relation to one scenario out of 5 that would have had an impact in rural housing. But I haven't seen any of the opposition spokespersons from any of the 3 main parties say, well, that's the scenario we would go for. And I think, there's no more than in relation to other debates that we've had here, whether it is climate change, whether it is budgetary, whether it is in relation to education or health or whatever. A small bit of tax honesty would be a good thing as well. So the Minister for Finance is providing an opportunity for the Oireachtas to say, well, this would be our view, and he will ultimately take it. But as well as that, there is a role for local authorities, and some local authorities have decided to reduce their property tax rate, which in some cases is, makes a small difference in terms of the householder, which could be welcome. But at the same time, shove up their commercial property taxes or their commercial property rates, which is, if you're going to be honest about it, there's a bit of inbuilt hypocrisy in there as well. So I think we need a bit of an honest debate here in the Oireachtas, first of all, in relation to the scenarios that the review group has put forward. And I do think then it behoves every party in the Dáil and in the Seanad to say, well, that's the way we would do it, while maintaining the tax base, and as the Minister for Finance has said, while also being fair. And then, as well as that, if there is changes to be made to it, to say what changes should be made, but the base has to be maintained. And being honest about it, the greater level of deferrals has a cost implication, and that means then that the local authorities, in each case, are going to have to increase their overall rate, and there's going to be an impact, urban and rural. I understand that people are saying that the Minister for Finance has put off this. He has done so that people can have a say. Everybody says that the Oireachtas should have a say. The Budgetary Oversight Committee was established for this purpose, so that senators and TDs would have an input into the budget. Now is the chance. So let's hear your view, and which of the 5 scenarios would you trump for?